Jillian says, you said at the beginning that magic came out of shamanism. It is widely accepted now that these shamans used a variety of psychedelics. Are you just not willing to advocate them? Okay, let's break that one down because there's a lot in that question. It's a good question. Yes, magic came out of shamanism. Many shamans use psychoactive substances, but there's a lot there to pick apart. First is, when we talk about shamanism, we're talking about many, many, many traditions from many cultures and many periods in history. Recently, since Carlos Castaneda, shamanism has become synonymous almost with the use of psychedelic drugs, to the point where anyone who takes a fifth of dried mushrooms decides they're a shaman, or anyone who takes ayahuasca decides they're a shaman. The reality is actually a lot more complex. Psychoactive substances are definitely used in shamanism. A lot of them are not just psychedelic mushrooms or things like that. They're things like datura, fly agaric mushroom, bark, God knows what. And shamanism is not necessarily synonymous with psychoactive substances. They may be used at times in some cultures and in some contexts by some shamans, but that doesn't mean those two things are equal. I received shamanic training in Nepal in 2003, 2004. Psychoactive drugs were not part of that practice. What I saw was there were a lot of ways to get into altered states, but they did not necessarily involve, at least at that time, psychoactive substances. There was a lot more magic and sorcery in shamanism than just tripping. If you read ethnographic studies of a lot of shamanic cultures, the reality of the use of psychoactive substances is that they're only usually used in very limited contexts. It's often that and shamanism in general needs to be understood in context, which is essentially what happened is shamans go into altered states of consciousness, or in some cases, psychoactive states of consciousness, largely only in special circumstances, only in order to diagnose medical conditions in other people, right? So it's a way of, investigating them psychedelically or psychically and then diagnosing a medical condition. That's a far cry from Terence McKenna, right? Or the Terence McKenna, Alex Gray, Graham Hancock, Daniel Pinchbeck school of shamanism, which is like, yeah, just get fucking loaded, man, and talk to the machine elves or whatever it is. It's much different in context. The reality with shamanism also as it's practiced now in shamanic cultures is it's a plan B for rural or impoverished communities when there's not access to medical care. Right, it's a backup form of medical care, and I think that's probably similar in cultures that do root work and things like that in the American South. In reality, it's a far less romantic prospect than we're led to believe by the drug-addled authors that everyone loves. So yeah, it's a backup form of medical care for people who have lost access to more institutionalized healthcare or do not have the means to afford it. And that's certainly what I saw when I studied it. But now that's not to say there are not incredibly vast, psychedelic, meaningful, magical, and sorceric landscapes that shamans operate in. That stuff is all there too. It's just that when you see it in context, it's a lot different than when you read about it. I do not advocate or not advocate psychedelics, right? But I want to make it clear that magic is independent of use of psychedelics and does not rely on them and is a separate discipline that can be done completely sober, right? Now, obviously, people have been combining these two things forever, right? But that is not necessary as long as one is willing to take the slower, less glamorous path, which is ultimately more sustainable. These states can be experienced without the aid of psychedelics. That is not knocking psychedelics. The psychedelic experience, in my opinion, is crucial to experience. It is an incredibly important, particularly with psilocybin, not necessarily LSD, but things like psilocybin are incredibly potent experiences. They are not without their dangers. There's nothing easy or simple about them. And there's no quick fix about them. And if one combines magic and psychedelics, we again get into this problem of self-delusion where it's very hard. It becomes very, very hard, especially if one is using them right at the outset and hasn't been doing these things straight for a long period of time, which is what I did. It's very hard to tell what's the practice and what's the drug. And reality gets very blurry, and that's when blowouts can happen. So And also, drugs in general can fray or expand and improperly contract the aura or the cities, the psychic abilities. They can prompt early awakening or kundalini experiences that somebody is not prepared to have. Those are risks that some people are willing to take, and that's fine. And nothing is gained in this world without risk. In general, I'm definitely going to say it's a really good idea to do this stuff completely sober for a long period of time first.